From a Nobel Peace Prize to the brink of all-out war. Conflict threatens to tear the Horn of Africa's most stable democracy apart. Will Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's ultimatum before a final offensive end the fighting or only make it worse? I'm Ali Aslan, and today's newsmaker is the conflict in the Tigray region of northern Ethiopia. In his Nobel Prize acceptance speech last year, Abiy Ahmed said war is the epitome of hell. Now it seems he considers war essential. Ethiopia's prime minister has vowed to bring Tigray back under federal control by any means necessary. Abiy considers Tigray's regional government illegal, accusing them of treason after holding unauthorized elections in September. The Tigray's People's Liberation Front says Abiy's federal government is illegal because its mandate expired after it failed to hold free and fair elections. Both sides accuse the other of war crimes. Caught in the middle are tens of thousands of displaced Ethiopians in what the UN is calling a humanitarian crisis. Although Abiy once proved he can make peace with his neighbors, can he do the same with his fellow countrymen? Cherny Bonini reports.
We came with 5 to 6 children on our backs. They don't have anything to drink or eat. All of us are suffering. We don't have clothes of our own. What we have, we borrowed from our neighbors. We want Tigrayan leaders and the government to look after us.
This woman is one of thousands of refugees fleeing the conflict in northern Ethiopia. There, the military is battling local forces led by the Tigray People's Liberation Front, or TPLF. Earlier this month, the federal government, led by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, launched airstrikes in the Tigray region after the TPLF allegedly attacked a military base, killing soldiers and stealing weapons. Tensions have been brewing for months over Tigray's decision to hold regional elections, defying a national ban due to the pandemic. The federal government called the vote illegal, setting off an escalation of rhetoric and action on both sides.
This rule of law enforcement operation will enable sustainable peace and stability throughout the country.
They have decided to go to war, and we should all prepare for it. There is no reason for this. This is the action of a self-loving government that is trying to resolve political differences through force, weapons, and war.
Amnesty International says likely hundreds of people were stabbed or hacked to death in a town called Mekelle at the western edge of the conflict. It's difficult to confirm who is responsible for the killings because of a communications blackout in the Tigray region. As the fighting intensifies and as rockets are fired into neighboring Eritrea, there are concerns that Ethiopia could plunge into a full-blown civil war. When it comes to war, Tigrayans have decades of experience. Tigrayan fighters led a war in the 1970s and 80s against Marxist dictator Mengistu Haile Mariam and his brutal regime, the Derg. Eventually, the Tigray People's Liberation Front toppled the government in 1991, becoming national heroes. They dominated Ethiopia's politics and military for nearly 3 decades until Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, an ethnic Oromo, was propelled to power in 2018. Abiy was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize last year for ending 2 decades of war with Eritrea. But with a war that could destabilize the Horn of Africa, is his legacy of uniting an ethnically divided nation fast unraveling. Cherny Bonini, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Ethiopia's capital is Mesenbet Assefa. He's an assistant professor of law at Addis Ababa University. From The Hague is Adem Abebe, an advisor at the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance. And in Washington, D.C. is Cameron Hudson, who was the Director of African Affairs at the U.S. National Security Council and now a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Africa center. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Much to talk about. Mesenbet, only a year ago, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy was internationally admired for being a peacemaker and reformer. He received the Nobel Peace Prize for making peace with neighboring Eritrea. Now he finds himself embroiled in a very nasty armed conflict with Tigrayan forces. What went wrong?
Well, what went wrong is that it's very hard really to blame Abiy Ahmed for whatever conflict we are in currently, because he has shown extreme patience and he has tried to be very pacifist with regard to avoiding war for almost a couple of years. So the problem is obviously the TPLF felt left out in the political process that is going on currently in Ethiopia, because as you know, for the past 27 years, this force was a very dominant force, not only in Ethiopia, but I think in the entire region of East Africa. So a small clique of TPLF, members of the TPLF, had significant economic, political control over the country. So that had serious political consequences, obviously. There were huge protests all over the country. And the power that was controlled by TPLF was changed in 2018 with the coming to power of Abiy Ahmed. So it's very difficult really to blame the governments, because the general perception here in Addis is that he has been extremely patient actually to avoid war and you know, at least consolidate the democratic process in the country. As you know, the war started, and this is also, I think, confirmed by members of the TPLF as well, when they started to attack the northern base in trying to control the arsenal, the army arsenal in the northern command. So, you know, it's easy to say, to blame, you know, governments, heads of states when these things happen. But, you know, for whatever reason, the conflict is happening. Abiy has shown incredible patience, and this is a general perception. If you ask any ordinary person in Addis here or in Ethiopia, they will tell you that he has shown incredible patience. And that's, I think, the general perception that we have here. But the war is obviously tragic.
Adem, Mesenbet said, if anything, Prime Minister Abiy was way too patient with the way Tigrayans have been acting, have been conducting themselves. It was about time that he reined them in, if I understood Mesenbet. Adem, your response?
No, thank you very much for having me. Mesenbet is right in the idea that the TPLF were dominant, and in 2018 they were essentially overthrown from power, and that led to a political contestation initially between the TPLF and Abiy's new government. And over time, because of the postponement of elections, it then shifted into a constitutional legal problem, and then ultimately we saw what happened. Now, in terms of who is to blame, I think, as Mesenbet said, it's difficult to tell, but we should not exclude the fact that the TPLF is hated not because of what it has been doing or allegedly has been doing in the past 2.5 years, but it's because of what it did for 2.5 decades. So it's authoritarian past that has been haunting them. But obviously, I think the patience that Abiy Ahmed showed, especially in the beginning, could, in my opinion, have continued. I think a lot of people, including Mesenbet, seems to think that the TPLF wanted either to rule the country or to ruin it. That's the perception. But I think their concern was because of their authoritarian past, they were worried for revenge. Right. And that's what they were trying to do. They were hiding in Mekelle, in Tigray, because they were worried. And I think Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed could have continued his patience, assured them that as a country, we did not want retribution. Basically, if he had strengthened his reconciliatory approach, perhaps things could have been better. Now I'm not, as provocative as the Tigray government has been, for me, I think it's more an outcome of fear of retribution than of coming back to rule the country.
Cameron, and now we have the paradox situation, an unfortunate situation where the TPLF sees the central government as illegitimate and vice versa. Both sides accuse each other of undermining their authority. The Tigray say Abiy just wants to weaken regional states and undermine federalism. Abiy replies, accuses the Tigray of undermining his authority and accusing them of treason. Quite a dilemma here.
Well, quite a dilemma. I mean, just responding to what the previous guests have said, I think there's a difference here between being patient and avoiding war and creating peace and creating the long-term kind of institutional and constitutional tools that are required to create peace in the country over the long run. I think what we're having here is a constitutional crisis that is playing out onto a battlefield. But it is true that Abiy is an unelected leader right now and is seen by the TPLF as illegitimate. They held elections, and so they see themselves as operating under the current constitution. But Abiy has clearly moved beyond where the constitution is and where ethnic federalism is at this current stage. And I think we haven't seen a lot of conversation about what a new political dispensation in the country institutionally and constitutionally can and should look like, so that we can achieve both Abiy's vision of kind of pan-Ethiopianism while also respecting the diversity and the strengths of Ethiopia's very rich and vibrant ethnic diversity, right? I mean, he has paid lip service, I think, to the notion of diversity through strength and strength through diversity. But in reality and under the law, I think there's a big gap between how you implement that and how you talk about that. And I think in that space, you're seeing conflict now. Yeah,
quite a balancing act that the Prime Minister has to undertake here in a very ethnically diverse country, of course. But Mesenbet, the accusation pointed towards Abiy on the part of the Tigray is that he wants to weaken regional states and undermine the federalist structure of Ethiopia. Do they have a point?
No, totally. I don't agree with that. I mean, it's what Adam said. Abiy's position, I think, for many Ethiopians, he got a lot of support, particularly because he has this reconciliatory position in the country. He's trying to find a middle ground political position for what the country needs now currently. Because, the federal arrangement is not going to go away for a while. But obviously, the country for the past 27 years was ruled by a small number of cliques that controlled the entire political and economic terrain. So it was obviously inevitable that some kind of political change would come. I think even the TPLF inner core would tell you that the change was inevitable in a way. So EPRDF, as we know it, especially the coalition, the former coalition in which the TPLF was part of, was an obsolete, decadent political party. That is without doubt, I think, true, and I think that many Ethiopians feel the same. Right. So what Abiy Ahmed tried to bring was, he created this prosperity party, which tried to balance both ethnic and social demands, and also ensure national unity and cooperative kind of spirit. Because at the end of the day, federalism is about creating a cooperative spirit. It's not division and separation. It's creating how to nurture common understanding and a cooperative spirit in a country.
Right.
So that's why he had garnered a lot of support, I think. And this idea of he's trying to dismantle the system and enforce his own only vision is totally wrong. And this is a perception, I think, that if you ask any ordinary person in Addis or in Ethiopia, they will tell you that Abiy is exactly the political figure they want now.
Right.
You can question the tactics that he has, but the political vision that he projects in Ethiopia is actually what exactly this country needs.
Adam, what do you make of Mesenbet's? Let me point out. What do you make of Mesenbet's argument that the TPLF, the Tigrayans, have overplayed their hands? Yes, they may have dominated Ethiopian politics for 3 decades before Abiy took over in 2018, but they only make up 5% of the overall population in the second most populous African nation. 109 million people live in Ethiopia. So is that an argument that you can subscribe to, that you would agree that the Tigrayans here are overplaying their hands?
No, they definitely were dominant politically, economically, as well as in the security sector, and as Mesenbet said, not just in Ethiopia but across the region. And the fact that the TPLF was actually, they were so good at sniffing dissent and eliminating it, not just within their party but outside as well, is I think the tragedy of Ethiopian history. As a country, we never really had any organized grand bargain, grand dialogue to resolve what are fundamentally two contesting narratives. There's a narrative that Abiy Ahmed, as Mesenbet said, is trying to project, and indeed it has some support. Not as Mesenbet says, it doesn't have an overwhelming support. I think that's difficult to tell at the moment, but there's definitely support for the idea that he projects, and there is at the same time quite significant support for the ethnic kind of politics that the TPLF wants to project. So they have dominated historically, and they have also historically eliminated. They have specialized at eliminating dissent, and their concern, indeed, now is that it might be their turn to be eliminated, and that's why they said fear more than aggression explains their behavior in the last couple of years.
Right. Cameron, of course, this conflict, as tragic it is to Ethiopians, also has an international dimension. As a matter of fact, the UN calls this a full-scale humanitarian crisis, which has the potential to destabilize the Horn of East Africa. Many people look towards Eritrea and Sudan, of course, two neighboring countries. Let's start with Eritrea. This is a country that Prime Minister Abiy made peace with, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for that. Now, they are, of course, considered, the TPLF at least considers Eritrea its arch enemy here. How do you see Eritrea's role unfolding?
Well, I think there's been a lot of conflicting information thus far in the conflict about what role Eritrea has been playing. We've seen statements actually out of Washington in the last few days praising Eritrean restraint and trying to make sure that they stay on the sidelines of this conflict. At the same time, we've seen TPLF statements suggesting that this is a plot that Prime Minister Abiy and Eritrean President Isaias have cooked up, and that the Eritreans have been, if not involved already in a very real sense, in a military sense, in a planning sense, and in an intelligence sharing and strategic sense, they've been involved. And so we really don't know. And I think part of that is because we just don't have a good sense of what the conflict looks like inside Tigray right now because of the communications blackout. The information that we have right now is really coming from the 30,000 or so refugees that have fled across the border into Sudan. And so we can take what they are saying, and we can hear what the Sudanese are saying. I mean, I think the Sudanese are in a very precarious position right now. They don't want to be dragged into a conflict. The refugees are coming into the eastern part of the country, which has seen a lot of instability. They've seen a lot of ethnic violence, tribal violence in that area. It's an area where there is a lot of poverty, which really can't support an influx of refugees right now. And I think the Sudanese are also afraid of having that become some kind of arms bazaar where gun runners would be using the very porous border area to try to support the TPLF or make money, profit somehow from the fighting going on inside of Ethiopia. So, I mean, it's a very, very dangerous place. You didn't even mention Somalia, where we have seen, the Ethiopians pull out forces, non-AMISOM forces from the peacekeeping operation there in the lead up to presidential and parliamentary elections in the early part of next year. So, Ethiopia has been the linchpin of security and peacekeeping in the entire Horn of Africa region for many years, and under the TPLF, under Menes Zenawi's leadership. And so to see that not just go away, but to see Ethiopia become a net exporter of instability in the region, I think has the potential to be devastating. And that's why you're seeing the UN, really sound the alarm right now. And I think we need to see much more from the international community to try to both ascertain what is going on inside of Tigray right now, the extent of the conflict, and then also to call for a cessation of hostilities immediately and the creation of some kind of dialogue that will reach long-term sustainable peace.
Yeah, indeed. Quite a delicate geopolitical situation unfolding there. Both Kenya and Uganda have called for negotiations to find peaceful resolutions, something, Mesenbet, that both parties, both Prime Minister Abiy and also the Tigrayans, have rejected up until now. Do you fear that this conflict, we've talked about the international ramifications, but let's look inside Ethiopia once again, Mesenbet. Do you fear that this conflict could spill into the rest of this very ethnically diverse country would maybe raise hopes and aspirations on the part of other ethnicities within Ethiopia. And do you think that is the reason why Abiy is so relentless in this particular conflict?
Not at this particular time. I think the conflict is focused obviously still in the Tigray region, and law enforcement measures that are being taken generally are around Tigray region. There are minor, I think, conflicts here and there, but they wouldn't create, I think, a significant problem as we go on. But it all depends, I think, on how much time this conflict would take, and if it drags on, obviously, the international pressure would mount, and both parties would be forced to negotiate. But from the reports that we are hearing, I think the army seems to be advancing quite quickly, and they seem to be organizing very well. So, and given also, I think, the experience and the discipline of the Ethiopian National Defense Forces, the hope is that if this thing gets over very quickly, that would solve much of the problem. But if it continues, obviously, it would not only have problems within the country, but also, I think, regionally. Right. So it all depends on, I think, how in the course of the next weeks, how this conflict comes to an end.
Indeed, Adem, as Mesenbet said, Prime Minister Abiy is claiming victory, saying we're making great advances, we're about to end this conflict. But of course, due to the communications blackout, it's pretty hard to assess what is true and what is not, considering that also the TPLF are saying we're going to be in this until the very end. Seems no compromise in sight, is there?
Not at all, unfortunately. And what I can say is that war, we often find it, we don't even know when we get into it. And it's even harder to know when it ends. At the moment, the federal government is saying that they're advancing. But what I can say is that it's going to take at least a few weeks. Even if the TPLF army soldiers are going to lose the capital, there's very likely to be an insurgency. They're going to turn themselves into an insurgency. So I do not think there will be a quick end to the war, to the conflict, to the crisis that is unfolding there. But what I can say is that even the TPLF itself, as Ethiopia as a country in general, is very reluctant to succumb to international pressure. The TPLF were the masters of it. They never really gave in to demands towards democratization, towards reconciliation and release of political prisoners. And Abiy has a similar character. It's really a historical, there's a record of resistance to international pressure. So the only thing I think that will force Abiy Ahmed to the table is how long the Tigray government will hold their ground. So the longer this continues, I think it will be harder for Abiy Ahmed to sustain the facade of a quick victory.
Yep.
But if they do end this quickly, I think that would be possible. But I think there's there's a lot of popular support at the moment for the conflict. But that is because everybody believes that it's going to end quickly.
Right.
And that is a difficult question to answer at this
that
stage
would be the hope, of course.
motivation.
That would be the hope. But if I'm listening to both Mesenbet and yourself, then a quick solution is not around the corner. Cameron, you know this region very well. How do you think this is going to play out? It seems like a lose-lose situation, no matter how this, who claims military victory here.
I don't think that there's military victory. I don't think that you're going to find victory that solves the problem that is underpinning this conflict. You're not going to find that on the battlefield, right? I mean, I think that if you just look at the two forces that are fighting right now, you're looking at 300,000 to 400,000 mobilized soldiers, both with mechanized divisions, with missiles, with tanks. This is not, when we talk about an African civil war, this is not a typical African civil war. We should be really looking at this as a kind of interstate conflict between two opposing forces, which are highly experienced, highly organized, highly trained, battle hardened, and with the equipment to make a fight last for a very long time. And I think the problem is that both sides see this conflict as existential. They see their personal survival as very much tied to the outcome of this conflict. And so I think when you paint it in those kind of stark terms, it's hard to imagine that there's a mediated solution or a kind of quick end to this. I agree with your panel analysts, I think that if the TPLF is kind of knocked back on its back feet, as we are seeing the Ethiopians trying to encircle Tigray, trying to cut them off from outside supplies, eventually they will run low on supplies. They will need a lifeline to sustain their fighting. I think that's several weeks away still. But if it's the goal of the Ethiopian government to try to choke them off, then I think it could create opportunities down the road. But again, I think the Tigrayans will move to a more insurgency type operation where you see perhaps bombings in Addis, and you see other acts of kind of terrorism or trying to draw in, as we've seen reports previously, trying to draw in outside states into their side. So I think that this is going to continue to be a very, very messy conflict, and we have to learn more about what's going on right now, what the atrocities and the conflict looks like from the inside. We just don't have that perspective.
Messy indeed. It seems it needs a peacemaker, as Prime Minister Abiy once was. We'll, of course, keep continuing this conflict. Adem Abebe, Mesenbet Assefa, and Cameron Hudson, thank you so much for joining us and providing some insights and context to this conflict in Ethiopia. Thank you out there for watching, and we'll see you next time.